इसकी पार्टी बहुत कम है। पार्टी में कोई एक ही बंदा पार्टी में आया है, नहीं खा रहा है। छोटा ही है वो, 3-4 सीज़न उससे बना रहा।
हेलो,
हमारी कॉन्फिटी है।
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to begin right now, and seeing the warm welcome that you have given Mr. Imran Khan, we'll absolve him of the need to explain why he was late. We'd like to begin right now by putting things in perspective. As Mr. Rasool Baksh earlier said, Pakistan is at a crossroads. Perhaps the genesis of this can be traced to the situation emanating from 9/11 and Pakistan's role in that entire war on terror. The contours of the present situation and how we as individuals and more specifically as the youth situate into this is hopefully going to be the discussion and what we'll be wanting to hear from Mr. Imran Khan. But before that, there's a little bit of distortion in this. Okay. We'd like to inform you, would like to take this opportunity to tell you that we'll be holding in December a forum for all political parties to discuss their manifestos and perhaps reach a consensus as to what the most pressing political problems are for the country. It makes sense in the situation. Political parties are really not, or their manifestos are not being heard, and we'd like Mr. Imran Khan and his party to join us in that, as well as other political parties. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest. Would not spend too much time upon that because I know I will not ever be able to do justice. Our guest today is simultaneously a cultural icon as well as a political figure. It is primarily the latter that we are referring to and have called him in his capacity as today. Hopefully he will be talking on this particular topic, which is worded the role of the youth in the present political developments. I'd like to invite, and I'm sure you'll give him the warm welcome once again, Mr. Imran.
Hello. Well, first of all, let me apologize for coming late. But I have to tell you that it was not my fault. Number one, we were told that the time was 5:30. And I would have been here at 5:30, but for the news that, and let me congratulate you all on emergency being imposed on us. So this thing about December debate is a bit premature. About our manifestos, because the general is determined to stay in power every which way. It is a defining moment in Pakistan's history. defining moment in more than one way. But it is a time, and I'm very pleased that I was invited here to address the youth. I repeat, I'm very pleased that I have been asked here to address the youth. I think that it is a critical time for all of you. It's your future that is at stake, and this is the defining moment where you could make a difference. In my opinion, this is a time when we have a great opportunity for bringing about a change. Remember, a crisis also affords an opportunity. And this is an opportunity that Pakistan can change its course, and we can change our future. So I think that, again, thank you very much for asking me to come here. I'll speak for about 15-20 minutes, and then what I really want to hear are your questions, and so I hope to have a lively question-answer. Because, as you know, we politicians tend to get carried away by the sound of our voice. We keep going much too long, and I really want your input so that at least, I know how you are thinking. So let me just start off with saying that what are the crises in Pakistan? The number one crisis is due to the war on terror. After 9/11, what we see now in Pakistan is a merging of all sorts of militant forces in this country. What started off as a hunt for Al-Qaeda by a general serving the United States interests, and what actually most of us felt that we were justified in helping the US in its war against terror of what happened to them on 9/11. But the way the general went about it, I think most of us knew where we were heading. Because the first, of course, the bombing of Afghanistan and the Pakistan's role played in the destruction of the regime in Afghanistan, I think that was the beginning of the mess that we are right now in. Because now you find Hamid Karzai saying he wants to talk to the moderate Taliban. Actually, the time was before the bombing. And I just want to briefly make you, let's go back to history, the facts that have been glossed over since. Before 9/11, after 9/11 and before the bombing, which was almost 3.5 weeks, in that time, basically the Taliban was saying that, look, give us the evidence and we will hand over Osama. Which was actually a very reasonable demand. Because when the Russians asked for who they perceived to be a terrorist, Ahmad Yakayov, who went to Britain to seek asylum, when the Russians wanted him back as a terrorist, what did the British government say? Give us the proofs in a court of law and we will hand him over to you. It's exactly what the Taliban was saying. And at the same time, the Shura of the Taliban had met. And this fact has been glossed over. And they actually had a meeting and recommended that Osama should leave Afghanistan. So 3.5 weeks was all the time that was given for a nation, to give up what was at that time. What they were asking is the proof that he's a terrorist and we will give him to you. So once the bombing started, once that regime was destroyed, all sorts of forces were let loose, which is why it's important to understand that to know the mess we are in right now. The only way you win a war against terror, this is the most critical thing, you can only win a war on terror if the people from within whom the terrorists operate from also perceive them to be terrorists. If they perceive them to become freedom fighters, heroes, martyrs, the war is lost. History tells us that every time the once a freedom movement starts, which becomes popular amongst the people, it's impossible, because what happens is that the more people you kill, the more people join the terrorists. And this is exactly what happened. What the 9/11 terrorists never expected was that George Bush would play so well in their hands as he has done now. What we are seeing now is that, first of all, you saw the Taliban movement grow. And why did it grow? Because the Americans did not want to lose troops as they are losing in Iraq. So basically they relied on aerial bombing. And as we all know, bombs do not discriminate between terrorists, women, children, innocent people. So as the bombing increased in Afghanistan, the Taliban found a great opportunity to have a resurgence. Because in the Afghan ethos, there are two things in the Pashtun culture which has made them resist every invader from Alexander downwards. Number one is that the Pashtun society is very democratic. And because they are democratic, they have never known slavery as has been by the people of the subcontinent in the feudal culture. So basically all along this Pashtun belt, they have valued their freedom because of the peculiar system of their devolved democracy, which every village basically makes up its own decisions. So therefore, that's one of the main reasons they've resisted conquerors from time immemorial. We all know that the Mughals suffered one of their biggest defeats at Ali Masjid. We know that the Sikhs eventually were beaten there in Jamrud, where Hari Singh died after a long struggle. We know that the 80-year-old history of the British, we know that throughout the 80 years, the highest number of British troops in the 200-year rule of the British Raj, highest number of British troops died in the tribal area, specifically Waziristan. And when the Russians came, it was the same tribes, the Pashtun tribes, that resisted the Russians and actually bore the brunt of all the casualties. So it was naive of the Americans to think that just because they are Americans and the US cavalry has come to the rescue, for them to have expected that there would be no resistance. And for Pakistan to have gone along with them and then allowed the sort of destruction and the killing which happened in the Pashtun belt, which also led to the emergence of the MMA in Pakistan as a direct reaction to the killing of the Pashtuns. So for us to think that we would not be expected by that was only because, I'm afraid, General Musharraf has not read his history, specifically the history of the tribal area. So therefore, gradually, as the momentum built in Afghanistan, the Pashtuns on this side of the Durand line were always going to be helping them. There were elements that would have helped them. There's no way General Musharraf, no matter how hard he wanted to please the Americans, could have stopped them. It's a 1,500-kilometer border. I've been to all that area. It is the most hostile terrain you can imagine. It's rugged mountain country. There has never been any Durand line. There is no border there. And so to have expected that Pakistan forces would be able to stop any sort of infiltration was always going to be a pipe dream. And so what you have seen gradually is this movement building up. The more they have been bombed, the more bombing has taken place, the more the resistance has grown. And gradually, when Pakistan army went into Waziristan, you must remember that there was a tribal structure in Waziristan. Even when when the Taliban were in power in Afghanistan, there was no Talibanization in the entire tribal area. Waziristan had its own structure. So gradually what you saw was, as the Pakistani army, and specifically when the Americans would bomb through these drones, innocent people started getting killed. More and more people, in order to seek revenge, which is the other trait of the Pashtun, that they seek revenge. Whenever someone got killed in a tribe, in a village, more or less the whole village would go to the other side, or the young men specifically. And these young men eventually started killing all the tribal elders who were cooperating with the Pakistan government. So eventually you had all the tribal maliks killed, And that whole area has now become what is called now Talibanized. But it is not a religious Talibanization, it is a political Talibanization. It's in order to seek revenge from the Pakistan army and the Americans. They have gone on to the other side. Now this is now spreading. What you're seeing is a reaction in the entire Pashtun belt against what has been going on. And now you're seeing Swat, which was one of the most peaceful areas. But by the way, the dynamics in Swat were completely different to Waziristan. Swat was a reaction of the lawlessness in Swat ever since it became part of Pakistan in 1974. In Dir and Swat, there is a great paper written by Dr. Trimzi on Dir, that what was Dir before 1974 and what happened to Dir after 1974 when it became part of Pakistan. And basically he goes on to say that how a very democratic society where there was complete rule of law completely changed the moment it became civilized by Pakistan. It became complete, there was lawlessness, there was corruption, there was no justice, whereas people would have immediate justice, suddenly justice disappeared. And what you saw, this Shariat, the Nabasi Shariat, was basically people seeking justice. And they still remembered, the elders still remembered that at the time, before 1974, people had justice. They had access to justice. Villagers, if they had a problem, immediately the village Jargah would sit, they would give a decision. The moment they became part of Pakistan, people had to find lawyers, the cases got delayed, the powerful could influence the justice system, and so there was a yearning in the people that, of the old days, which was, at the time of Wali of Swat, it was basically Shariat law, as was before 1857 most of the Muslim India. So therefore there was this, so it was a different dynamics of this movement in Swat. It started off only as a desire to have a better system of justice. And then of course Lal Masjid happened, which is again different. That's different, it's fundamentalism, which in every human community you have Hindu fundamentalists, you have Christian, you have Jews. So you have fundamentalists, which is basically out of a reaction where you feel your culture is being threatened by an alien culture. This is basically what happened in Islamabad. And this movement is gradually growing in Pakistan. And the more the Musharraf's enlightened moderation was perceived as vulgarity, the more there's been a reaction in certain parts of Pakistan, and especially in the whole northern belt, in the rural areas, you're seeing this movement already. So what is happening is that under Musharraf, all these movements are now merging together. The reason why it is very serious is that unless someone tackles this problem properly, this is now going to spread to the rest of Pakistan. This emergency and another 5-year dose of Musharraf, and you will suddenly see the sort of thing happening there will be happening all over Pakistan, because nothing can stop it. Karen Armstrong has written actually a very good book on the battle for God. It's about fundamentalist movements all over the world. The moment you try and crush a fundamentalist movement through militancy, it always through violence, it becomes militant. So now that's one problem which we face and which has to be dealt with. And I'll give you my solutions how it's going to be dealt with. Number two is another serious problem in Pakistan, which is the big disparity between the rich and the poor, which is growing at a phenomenal rate. The economic injustice. Because Pakistan has gradually evolved into a country which is basically for a tiny elite. It only caters for a little elite at top. All the resources in this country, all the economic policies are only for us to 0.1% of the population. The rest of the population is basically deprived in this country, does not have opportunities. The worst is the education system in Pakistan, which increases these disparities. In the 3 sports, I'll just give you an example, the 3 sports which Pakistan competed in international level were hockey, squash, cricket. In all these 3 sports, the main talent always came from the lower middle classes. When I was at HSN, had the best sports facilities, best grounds, we had coaches, everything, but boys from HSN could not compete with the boys who were coming from Minto Park, from playing in the street cricket. They were they just could not compete with the with the sort of hunger and drive of players which come from the lower background. Similarly, in Pakistan, when the system of education, which really was intact more or less in 1970, the colonial education system, the government schools provided the best intellectuals of Pakistan. It was not us, HSL and other schools, but it was the government schools then. Because they were the people who had the greatest hunger to move up, to improve themselves. Now in Pakistan, we have actually made we made a ceiling, a barrier for these people. We do not allow them to come up. The education system actually does not allow the people, the mass talent in Pakistan to actually come up. And this is the biggest injustice in this country. And we, the privileged people sitting here, should speak out against it. Because this is unsustainable. Eventually this will bring the whole country down. Remember, 100 million Pakistanis are below the age of 25. This in itself, if we educate them, if we spend money on them, if we develop our human beings, this becomes an asset. If we leave them as they are, this is going to destroy Pakistan eventually. Remember Pakistan, in 1965, there was this Swedish Nobel Prize winner. In 1965, he wrote a book in which he, on the whole of Asia, where he says, in 1965, that Pakistan was the country, the current Pakistan, West Pakistan, was the country that would become the California of Asia. California meaning that in the US, the highest per capita being in California, he felt that this country, this area had the greatest potential in becoming the California of Asia. What went wrong is, number one, of course, we couldn't fix our political system. And as a result of that, not fixing the political system and not having public representation in government, voices not being in government, you had this lopsided system. But most importantly, by spending money on arms and not spending money on the human capital in this country, this is why we are in this state. And this particular system, rather than correcting this colonial system, synthesizing the syllabus, improving the government schools, what we have ended up doing is actually the worst of the system, where we've actually developed this English medium system, which, not just that it's an elitist system, but also it makes us subservient to another culture. It has an inbuilt inferiority complex for us in it. It brings self-loathing in us. You see watch television programs, you find, especially since the enlightened moderate days, you watch the TV programs and you see anyone who first, almost every program, first they all start speaking in English to establish that they are educated. Then they start in Urdu again. And the whole culture of us trying to be embarrassed of ourselves. Remember, a society which goes up always has self-esteem. They believe in themselves. There's something, which those of you who would have played sport would realize, that it is essential for a team to win, to have self-belief. If you do not have self-belief, you cannot compete. That belief that you can beat anyone is the most important thing a sportsman must have when he steps onto the field. So when you have an elite in a country which all that self-esteem is destroyed by an education system which inherently tells you that you are inferior to another culture and civilization, how can you have creativity and originality coming out of that sort of system? And so there is the elite, which is completely different system of education, and then the majority of the people, the whole education system has been neglected. I'll just give you a very quick example before I move on. In Miyawali, when I did a survey, I found 70% of the government schools closed. That's out of 476 schools, 70% of the schools are closed. 20% only exist on paper, there are no schools on the ground, and the 50% schools that are on the ground, there are no teachers. So you cannot imagine the crisis that's coming. When they all talk about why I heard Benazir say about madrasas, what choice have people got? if the children have no education, I mean, they'd be happy to send them to poor people to madrasa, at least to get literacy. So this is a big problem in Pakistan, which neither these two junior king and senior king, Bush and Dollar Aziz, no one realizes what's happening. So then education. Number two is the taxation system, the economic policy. Now, in England, you know, when I first went as an 18-year-old, the thing that struck me most was a welfare state. You could walk into a hospital, get free treatment. You could, you know, go to a school. You know, I was when I went, I had to spend 9 months to do my A-levels. So my club put me in this grammar school. Free education, quality education, free. Then, if you're an ordinary citizen and you have to go to court, you have legal aid. You're protected. They get a lawyer for you. If you are unemployed, you have unemployment benefits. The state looks after you until you get employed, which is what a welfare state is. Here in Pakistan, and the reason why that happens is that, of course, the rich pay taxes and the money is spent on the common people. The resource transfer is estimated in European countries is about 35. Every year, 35% of transfer from the rich to the poor people or common people. Even in the US, which is a capitalist country, there's about 16% money transferred from the rich to the masses for social security. In Pakistan, the poor subsidize the rich. 90% of taxes in Pakistan are indirect. 90% of taxes are indirect. But the worst thing this Shaukat Aziz did was that in 2000 January, he sent a letter to the IMF. I have the letter. He said, look, basically, I am your obedient servant. You know, the previous government has been fudging figures. I want to tell you what the true figures are. And so he gave, you know, whatever the fudging was. So the IMF then wrote and told him to remove all the subsidies. So all subsidies were removed from the agriculture sector. And GST was applied to all the things that were going into producing food. So now when you see these price rising, you know, the food price inflation, that's where the beginning started. That when in India, for instance, why isn't the inflation so high? Because countries always, and when I spoke to Mohammad, I had a long chat with him, how he changed Malaysia. One of the things he said was that they made sure that the things that common people consume, they made sure that the price was kept very low. And here we are in Pakistan, you know, by removing all this is a country which is what could potentially one of the richest agricultural land in anywhere. You know, there's a friend of mine who's working in Australia. And he told me in Australia, he said that in Australia, barely you can find, you know, the topsoil in Australia, which is the most crucial thing, you know, for fertility. He said is about 6 inches. He said in Pakistan, it is in areas that's 6 feet, the topsoil. It's one of the most productive lands we have, but unfortunately, the farming sector has been completely neglected. All the money transferred, because it's all to the rich and the industrials are rich, the money is all transferred to this industrial class at the expense of the farmers. In India, the reason why the yields are 3 times the size on similar land, I mean, East Punjab, West Punjab, 3 times high the yields are because the government subsidizes the small farmer. So when the small farmer gets money, he puts it back on the land, and when he puts the money back onto the land, he makes money. He doesn't want to buy a flat in London. He wants to put it back in the land. And so when he gets rich, the country gets rich. When he produces, the country gets rich. In Pakistan, what they've done is exactly the opposite. You know, the rich farmers, of course, can get all the credit and have it waived off. Most of them are political. But the poor common farmer has been starved in Pakistan. And so this is, you know, the whole policy has been tilted. The lopsided, the taxation system, the economic policies, they are all to benefit a tiny class. You know, people made billions in stock exchange, made billions in property. And in Lahore, all the political class, all the Nazans, town Nazans, all land grabbers, all of them made plenty of money. Not 1% of capital gains tax was paid, either by all the money made in property. And I'll just give you, Dr. Rashid Amjad, who was a top economist, he assessed that the Phase 6 housing society, Defense Housing Society in Lahore, he assessed its value to be $18 billion. They didn't pay one, on all the files that were being transferred, not 1% of capital gains tax was paid. All the tax was paid by the government through not just the price hike inflation. So the economic system is all lopsided. That needs to be changed. Because soon we will be in a state of Kenya, as in Nairobi. I don't know how many of you feel in Nairobi. The rich people now live in fortresses. There are gunmen on top keeping the masses out. And when they go out of the fortresses, they warn you that, listen, make sure if you're wearing a watch, don't take your hand out of the car because they might take your hand with the watch. So it's inevitable. As you see the rise in crime in Pakistan, it is inevitable that with a population of 160 million, majority of them now born without education, and in the classes and where they're totally deprived, this cannot lead to a stable society. The other thing, of course, which has to be corrected in Pakistan is that we have to have a state which takes responsibility for the health of the population. I don't know whether you know that 500,000 children in Pakistan die every year because they don't have access to clean drinking water or water-borne diseases. This is UNICEF figure. I was a special representative of UNICEF, and that's when I discovered that 500,000 children die every year because of waterborne diseases. So we need a state, so now I come to the solutions. We need a state that has to do two things. Number one, you have to have rule of law in Pakistan. Rule of law you can only have with an independent judicial system. You can only have an independent judicial system if constitutionally the judicial commission, we make a judicial commission approved by the parliament, both opposition and government, by a parliamentary committee which is cross-parliamentary, and that approves a judicial commission who then has constitutional protection, has a set tenure, and does two things: the selection of judges, the selection, promotion of judges, and their accountability. So it is completely removed from the government, so the judiciary no longer can in any way be controlled by the government. This has to be the number one way of moving forward. Reason why you have to do this is because at the moment, the entire criminal class in Pakistan wants to go into politics. If you want to see an example, go to the parliament. If you want to see a better example, start from the chief minister here. I can give you in writing that his family is unique, that there is no crime in the book they have not committed. Then of course you have a lot of ministers. I have seen their files myself at the time when I mistakenly thought that General Musharraf was a reformer. I happened to see their files were shown to me by NAB, and most of them, have quite thick files of the money they've accumulated. And then, of course, if you want to see, part of the American dream team, there's a Washington dream team to take over Pakistan. There's, of course, Musharraf, the military man, but moderate. Then there is, the key word, remember, the key word is moderate. If you're moderate, all your sins are absolved. Then there is, of course, liberal Benazir. The most liberal thing about it is that she's liberally corrupt. And then, of course, part of the Washington Dream Team, lives in London, called Altaf Hussain. When I happened to call Altaf Hussain Pakistan's #1 terrorist, MQM went on the attack. So they used everything. First of all, they threatened me, as they normally do. Then they changed tack because they suddenly realized that if they threatened me, anything happened to me, poor Altaf, I would get into trouble by Scotland Yard because I'd already gone to court. So they got a bit scared of that. Then they tried the other thing, blackmailing, which is another thing. Now with me, they found it difficult. Normally they've got a full secretariat of every political figure in Pakistan, which they've got files on to blackmail them. So with me, they only ended up with poor old Sita White. As you know, she's not with us anymore, but that didn't stop them. So I had this Babar Wari sitting next to me on television. Showing the photograph, he says, look, the girl really looks like you. Admit it, she's your daughter. I was too embarrassed to say anything on television because everyone is watching. But afterwards I told Babar Wari, I said, look Babar, if just because she resembles me, if that's the criterion, I'll take you to any town in Africa, you'll find her. So this moderate alliance, this moderate alliance, you should all feel very happy. We'll all be at the Dal Pasand. The words that have been used, everyone is now moderate, enlightened, everything. So this moderate alliance, the only purpose of this alliance is of course to pursue the agenda where our army at $70 million a month will become cheap mercenaries to work for the US to hunt down Pakistanis. And when Pakistanis get killed, it'll be collateral damage. Women and children get killed, as you know, and you don't know. By the way, you do not know how many women, children have been killed in this war on terror. And I can tell you that while Shaukat Aziz and Musharraf know exactly how many Americans have died in Afghanistan and in Iraq, I can bet you anything they do not know since 9/11 how many Pakistanis have died. We don't know how many Pakistani soldiers have died. We certainly do not know how many Pakistani civilians have died in this war on terror. And what is very important for you to realize is this, that the reason why we need an independent judiciary is not just to block the way of military adventurers, but actually to stop criminals from going into politics. Because it's not just that you have mega criminals like, you see the Chaudhurys sitting there. You also have, in every district you have criminals sitting there. The man who got the Q League ticket to fight against me 1-to-1 in the last election in Miawali is the biggest drug baron in Miawali. And this guy was serving a jail sentence when suddenly the Chaudhurys realized that this was the perfect man to fight me because he had lots of money. So you have every level, you have the system. Because the executive controls the judiciary, everyone wants to be part of the executive. Every criminal wants to be part of the executive, either to become a crook or to protect his corruption. That's why this is very important. The whole system, this whole lota culture. Why do you have these lotas? You have these lotas because they have to be in power to avoid getting thrown in jail. So that's why you have this each time, the bizarre scene when Nawaz Sharif was coming, it was the most hilarious time. You cannot imagine what was happening. Because when Nawaz Sharif was arriving from there, now all these Q League lotas all suddenly got terrified because they realized if Nawaz Sharif came in, he would come into power. So now they were all sitting in balance. If Nawaz Sharif had got out of the airport, I can give you in writing, Q League would have evaporated. All of them would have joined N League, because they all realized that they could not be on the opposite side of the law. So you had this bizarre thing. There was something very funny that happened in Punjab. Sometime back, there was Manzoor Bhattu's government, and he was the Chief Minister of Punjab. And what happened was that there was a power struggle going on. So at one point, it looked as if Manzoor Bhattu was going to control the Punjab Assembly. So the whole Punjab Assembly went on that side. Then they discovered, overnight, the SETI discovered that no, Nawaz Sharif has got the upper hand. So the whole of them went on to the other side. Then they again went on to the other side when the news came. So I mean, it is just it is a joke. How can you, as civilized people, just imagine, how can you expect this country to achieve its potential when these jokers are sitting on top? And you can only do it if you have an independent judicial system where they know that even if they are government, they can be prosecuted. That's the only way you can stop this nonsense from taking place. And that's why, remember one thing, number one thing is fixing the judicial system. It is imperative. If the judiciary is not fixed, you can have Shaukat Aziz talk about the 7% growth rate until the cows come home. It's not going to make any difference. The country has no future. It is going to become a failed state. So the critical thing is the judiciary. Number two is the education system. We have to have an education emergency in Pakistan. This is an emergency situation now. It is a catastrophe we are heading towards. It has to be dealt with at an emergency level. We have to have one syllabus in Pakistan. If Malaysia can do it, India can do it, Singapore can do it, why can't we do it? Why do we have to have this sort of bizarre system going on, which is creating schisms in our society, divisions? There's a cultural problem in Pakistan. You have Dini Madrasa, Urdu medium, English medium, all different cultures. And then you have differences in English medium education, which also, so we have to have one syllabus in Pakistan, education emergency. All our resources should be diverted towards education. You have to solve these palaces, PM house, governor houses, president houses. All of them must become education institutions. All that money must, whoever is on top must lead an austere life. Give an example that, this is a poor country. Look at Shaukat Aziz. Would you think that this is a poor country the way you look at Shaukat Aziz, touring? You don't know, you don't know some of the things. General Musharraf goes to, now listen to this. General Musharraf goes to the US. Now he's gone to the US for an 18-day tour. He spends 2 crore rupees only on fashion shows. He takes models from here doing fashion shows in America. Have you ever heard anything more stupid like that? That's trying to promote our culture. This is our culture, fashion models going there. This is, unfortunately, this is the caliber of the man. Actually, you should have known the caliber of the man when he wrote that book in Line of Fire. I refused to read it only for one reason. The only reason I did not read it was because it was in non-fiction. If it was in fiction, I would have read it. How can a mature man write a book like that? The bullets were flying and I was this and that. That the man is a coward. All his actions have proved that. But anyway, so education, number one is rule of law, education. Number 3, this whole economic, the system has to be changed. You don't need to raise the taxes in Pakistan. You just do not want to have any sacred cows who have tax exemption. And you'll be surprised, all these amnesties, also not just the amnesty to Benazir's 100 billion rupees, amnesty to every business now has tax amnesties. all you have to do is show your money coming from abroad as remittances and you are tax-free. So all this has to be changed. You tax, not reasonable taxes, not high taxes, but make sure that everyone pays taxes. Who doesn't pay taxes, it goes straight to jail, like in the US. No one can, if you're caught in tax fraud, you go to jail. And you see how quickly the revenue rises in Pakistan. And the fourth thing is, we must also have an employment emergency. How to give employment to the people in the rural areas and in the urban areas. This was the key of Mahathir's revival of Malaysia. The specific plan was to provide employment to the people. And this has to be the key. How do we, and inshallah, whenever the emergency is lifted, when we present our manifesto to you, I guarantee you that we will have the most innovative ways of providing employment in Pakistan, because it is an emergency situation. Otherwise, you will find deteriorating situations. If you don't provide employment to young people in the rural areas, you will soon have these cities unsustainable, these huge cities with people with no facilities and people flocking to the main urban centers. So anyway, these are the four things I think which are critical. And the solution to this war on terror is this, that there is no way any Pakistani soldier should be in the tribal area. We should pull the soldiers back. We should ask the Americans that there is no military solution to this war on terror. If today there is a consensus in the United States that there is no military solution in Iraq, and if the Democrats are demanding a timetable for withdrawal of troops from Iraq, why are they not demanding the same thing in Afghanistan? Paddy Ashdown was this UN rep was in Afghanistan. He categorically stated that there is no military solution in Afghanistan. So if there is no military solution, why are they not demanding a withdrawal of the troops? Because it is not American troops that are dying. It's Afghan troops and Afghan civilians, Pakistani troops and Pakistani civilians, cannon fodder that is being killed. So no one is asking for a withdrawal here. We are here just expected to do more and more and more. And for $70 million a month. I think that the time has come for Pakistanis to stand up and say, there is no military solution. Find a political solution. If Hamid Karzai can speak to the Taliban, moderate Taliban there, why should we not be seeking a political settlement everywhere? In Swat, in the tribal areas. And the more you send your troops there, the more provocation, the more civilians getting killed. And believe me, this is unsustainable. Sooner or later, the army is going to rebel against it. The army, the common soldier who is now giving up arms in droves, 200 people giving up, who don't want to fight, soon, and if the army keeps getting targeted, in Sargodha the airmen get killed, and in Pindi the ISI get killed, soon you will have generals hiding behind fortresses. Because there is no way the army can sustain this action for long. And it's only a matter of time before you have some sort of rebellion within the army. So we have to move out of this war on terror, explain to them, and the remedy is that you should help the tribes, encourage the tribes. This is what the British did. The British, when they wanted to get things done by the tribes, they would help them, they would bribe them, they would pay them, they paid them subsidies, but they did not send their troops to achieve anything because they knew it did not work. They have left a material, 80 years material on the tribal area. So in my opinion, the time has come to demand for a timetable of withdrawal from Afghanistan. As long as NATO is there, you cannot expect Pakistan will not be able to stop any infiltration. And we will always be pressurized by Americans. Again, yesterday, the American drones killed 10, 15 tribal people. And this will just go on, and there's no end to it, and Pakistan will become another Algeria. We are heading towards becoming an Algeria. So there is no military solution to this war, and the civil society should stand up apart from the political parties. We have to stand up and say that find a political settlement with it. Thank you. Well, the question is, how does the civil society and specifically the students organize themselves for the struggle? The short answer is join Tehreek-e-Insaf. I'd rather not go in the longer answer. No, but I think what you have to, I think this is a critical time, really, no jokes apart. Everyone must be politicized. You know, Aristotle 2,500 years ago said, if there is injustice in society, every member, every citizen will take part in politics, except two types. And I hope you don't belong to those two types. One is the timid, the cowards, petrified that the Chaudhry's Munaslai will have me beaten up or something. And the second type are the materialists. That, you know, I'm all right, my factory is going, my shops are doing well, I have enough money, why should I care? Apart from these two, every member of the society must take part in politics. The only way you make a change in a society is through politics. For 11 years I've been told, Imran, why didn't you do social work? You were doing, Shaukat Khanam, and, you could have done so much more. You cannot. For doing social work, we do it for our own self. We do it for our hereafter. But to change a society, I'm afraid you can only change a society politically. Otherwise, Maulana Eidi would have changed Karachi by now. Karachi would not be dominated by Altaf by sitting from London and killing people from there, sending assassination squads from London. You have to, change comes political.
Before we continue, I would just like to state some ground rules. Please keep your questions short, and only one question. Don't ask supplementary questions because there are too many people, and perhaps you won't have enough time.
I think it's not only about criticizing activity. I think it's just the change of culture that is needed. People need to change their thinking, bring more empathy into it. I think we have more empathy. I think the change of the company is not just starting politics.
To comment.
I think it's good advice
The question is question comes statement is that change comes when we all decide we have empathy for the poor people, and if the rich decide to look after the poor. But how do you tell this to, tell me, now, I can see you going and telling this to Chaudhry Parvez Ali that you're a very rich man, it's about time you started giving to the poor. By the way, he does that on the 7 billion rupees that have been spent on Chaudhry Parvez Ali so far. Have you seen on television? I mean, I don't know whether you, how can you not see it? If you see TV, you see his face there. And every time, it's, ehsaas hona chahiye. Maybe he already has the empathy, I don't know. But unfortunately, this is not how the world works. Unfortunately, greed is a part of human society. And when you have, when, as Edmund Burke said, all that remains for evil to prevail is for good people to remain silent. So one point I agree with you, that even if you become vocal, even if you speak out against it, that's one step. But really, you have to be organized in political movement if you want to defeat this lot up there.
You in the back, could you stand up and please speak up?
So you just said that join Tehreek-e-Insaf, but it's been almost a decade that you have been pursuing politics, and still 90% of the time we see somebody representing Tehreek-e-Insaf, it's just Imran Khan. So why you have not been able to gather, despite all this popular support, I don't feel?
Well, the reason is because I'm afraid educated people here are too scared to join politics. Educated people in Pakistan, actually it's the same syndrome. When I first joined politics, I went to, my friends, from HSN, my old friends. So I went to all of them. There was a lot of encouragement. हम पीछे से आपकी मदद करेंगे, आप इमरान खान चलो, हम पीछे आपके साथ हैं। और मुझे ये जो पीछे से मदद करनी है ना, वो मुझे याद आ गई। एक दफा शौकत खानम के लिए हम फंड रेजिंग कर रहे हैं, ये मेरा बड़ा फेवरेट वाकया है। तो एक आदमी ने 20 लाख का चेक लाके दे दिया, बड़ी हॉल में तालियां, 20 लाख का चेक, सारा हॉल तालियां बजा रहा है, छोटी छोटी लोग डोनेशन, 20 लाख का चेक। जब हमने चेक देखा, वो तालियां भी बज गई, वो चला भी गया, हमने जरा चेक देखा, उसने साइन नहीं किया हुआ था। हमने उसको बड़ा वहां से कहा कि सर वो आप साइन करना भूल गए। कहता अच्छे कामों में मैं अपना नाम सामने नहीं लाना चाहता, पीछे रह के काम करना है ना, अच्छे कामों में पीछे बैठ के काम करूंगा। This is one of the biggest reasons. आपने कहा ना कि why the main reason is that people who don't need politics, they should be in politics but they don't want to be. You know, I always was asked this question, इमरान साहब आपको पॉलिटिक्स में आने की क्या जरूरत थी? मीनिंग कि अगर आपके पास पैसा है, कंफर्टेबल है, आप क्यों पॉलिटिक्स में आ रहे हैं? वो शेख रशीद को आना चाहिए पॉलिटिक्स में। See, unless and until, remember what I said about what Aristotle said. It's very important that you must have social consciousness, because eventually you will be affected. Don't think that you will also, maybe most of you think that you will be living in the land of milk and honey, either go to US or England eventually. But if you live in Pakistan, if you want to live here, you have to fight for it. There is no shortcut to it. There's no shortcut to a struggle. You have to struggle to make Pakistan a just, democratic society. And believe me, I've seen Pakistanis more than all of you. Since I was 18, when I first went to England, I saw the Pakistani communities there and the American community when I used to go to the US. The moment the people from here get a level playing field, the moment they get anything that resembles a level playing field, there's so much vibrancy and initiative that you see the people go up. And I've seen the same people starting with a little, taxi, then shop, and then each year you see that there's a lot of vibrancy in the society. You've got to make Pakistan, fight to make Pakistan a society which is just, where there is meritocracy, where people have a level playing field. You don't need to have roti kapda makan. These people will get roti kapda makan themselves once you provide them the opportunity. Okay, let me now rephrase that. Being politically very correct, let me rephrase it, okay. What I'm saying is that in Waziristan, the system is such, and by the way, let me quote Olaf Caro, who was in 1935, the British governor of Northwest Friendly Province. In his book, he writes that the oldest and purest form of democracy is in the whole of tribal area. The reason is very simple, and I just want you to understand this. The reason is that every household is represented in the village. In the village council, every household is represented. It happens to be that the head of the household is a man, unfortunately, but every household is represented in a village, and a village will never accept the decision of any central power. It's total decentralization, and the villages take their own decisions. Now, I was in the context of the subcontinent I was talking about. In the subcontinent, that area, at least every household had a voice represented. They are free, liberated people. But you look at the whole of Indian subcontinent. There, not only there is no democracy, but women still don't have any share in the system. So women still, it's not as if in the whole of Punjab or in Sindh that the women are represented anywhere. In the rural areas, in the whole of rural Pakistan, what I've never seen any, people talk about, we heard about the Hudud ordinance, but no one talks about one thing, that women do not have their inheritance rights in whole of rural Pakistan. Even cities, they don't have it. But in rural Pakistan, no woman has any inheritance. So anyway, so just specifically, I was actually talking about the democratic system compared to not sort of Western democracy, but just compared to what is happening in the subcontinent.
Before we continue, there is some information that is coming in. It might just be a rumor, but it's a rumor that's basically going on everywhere. It's basically been saying that martial law has been imposed. PCO promulgated in the CJ. Yeah, and the CJ has been removed.
It's one and the same thing, don't worry. Martial law, emergency, whatever.
Would we just
Emergency has been imposed, and all the major television news stations have been barricaded, the authorities there, and he's going to speak to them in like
I can already tell you the speech that will be taking place later tonight. बड़े मुश्किल में पड़ा हुआ है.
in the back. Yeah, you.
मेरा बेसिकली क्वेश्चन ये है कि जो मास किलिंग हो रही है हर जगह पर, मतलब कराची में अगर देखा जाए तो उसमें भी 40 में से 3 जो है ना वो पुश्तून की हुई थी. लाल मस्जिद में भी अगर देखा है तो मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द पीपल जो जिनकी किलिंग हुई है उसमें पुश्तून है. तो मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि हर जगह पुश्तून ही क्यों मरते हैं, और ये जो और ये सब जो वार आ रहा है ये सिर्फ पुश्तून ही की टारगेट है कि नहीं कोई और इसमें मतलब इन्वॉल्व है?
मैं इसका आपको जवाब देता हूँ. देखिए, पुश्तूनों का एक प्रॉब्लम है कि वो वफादार गुलाम नहीं बन सकते. वो गुलाम मुशर्रफ उनको कह रहा है, वो कभी आपको वो कॉन्वर्सेशन जो मुझे जनरल महमूद ने बताया था कि उसका और मुल्ला उमर का कॉन्वर्सेशन हुआ जब ये 9/11 के बाद. तो वो कहता है कि वो मुल्ला उमर के पास गया तो उसने उसे कहा कि ये अमेरिकन, उनके पास बड़े जबरदस्त बॉम्ब हैं, डेजी कटर है और फलाना है, और वो न्यूक्लियर भी आपके ऊपर इस्तेमाल कर देंगे, तो आपको उसामा उनको दे देना चाहिए. तो वो कहता मुल्ला उमर चुप करके सुनता रहा. ये बोलता गया कि वो ये हो जाएगा, बर्बाद हो जाओगे, मर जाओगे, ये हो जाएगा. कहता वो चुप करके बैठा रहा. तो वो कहता कि देखो, अगर मुझे अल्लाह ने बचाना है तो वो मुझे मार नहीं सकते, और अगर अल्लाह ने मेरा फैसला किया मरना है तो मैं बच नहीं सकता. कहता उसके बाद कहा कि बस आराम से उसको चला गया. तो मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है कि हम तो इस थियरी को सब्सक्राइब नहीं करते. हम समझते हैं कि हिकमत होनी चाहिए, विजडम होनी चाहिए. लेकिन बेसिकली एक चीज आप याद रखें कि ये पश्तून की सारी आप तारीख उठा के देखें, उनकी सारी तारीख ही ये है कि उन्होंने कभी अंग्रेजों का 1942 में अंग्रेजों ने भी एक कर्जाई बैठा दिया था, उसका नाम था दोस्त मोहम्मद. वो उन्होंने भी बादशाह बैठा, वो भी 3 साल तक बड़े आराम से बादशाह करता रहा. उसके बाद आहिस्ता आहिस्ता अपराइजिंग हुई और उसको उन्होंने निकाल दिया. ये उनके कंसिस्टेंट रशियंस ने कंसिस्टेंटली सोवियट्स they always put their own. There were 3 people that the Soviets each time they put them imposed these Karzai types. So therefore the problem with the Pashtun is that he will always, because of the social system he has been brought up, this is what you must all understand. Democratic system, once you taste the freedom that a social system gives you, then you will not accept slavery. You know, in England, when I first went as an 18-year-old, the thing also that surprised me was, young students with me, each time anything happened, they would say, this is my right. But this is my right. You know, I had never heard of this in Pakistan because we were brought up. Another savior then was General Khan, so we were saved by him then. And so we didn't understand what he meant, this is my right. So you know, this is when you grow up in a society that gives you freedom, then you will not give it up. You will be willing to fight for it. We in this part of the subcontinent are used to the feudal system. And the feudal system, the powerful oppress the weak. So people are not, they've always used, they've been used to slavery, so it didn't matter whether there were Sikhs ruling them or British or Mughals. It didn't matter because the man at the bottom was never free.